Jake Thompson wiped the grease from his hands onto a rag and glanced at the clock hanging on the wall of his garage. It was almost noon, and the warm summer sun streamed through the open door, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. He sighed, leaning back against the hood of the old Chevy he'd been working on all morning. Life in his small Midwestern town was predictable. Fix cars, grab lunch with Karen, maybe watch a game later. But today felt different. The faint hum of the TV in the corner caught his attention. Karen had left it on before heading out to run errands, and the news anchor's voice carried an unusual urgency. Jake frowned and walked over, wiping his hands again as he listened. The screen showed footage of something massive, a fleet of ships, dark and ominous, hovering above Earth's atmosphere. They weren't human-made. That much was clear. What the hell? Jake muttered under his breath, stepping closer. The reporter explained that these unidentified objects had appeared overnight, positioning themselves over major cities worldwide. Governments were scrambling to respond, but details were scarce. No one knew who or what they were dealing with. Jake scratched the back of his neck, feeling uneasy. Aliens? Really? He'd always thought those stories were just for movies. But this looked real. Too real. His phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him. It was Karen. "Did you see the news?" she asked without preamble, her voice tight with worry. "I'm looking at it right now," Jake replied, keeping his tone calm even though his stomach churned. "What do they want?" "They haven't said anything yet," Karen answered quickly. "But there's going to be some kind of announcement soon. The president is speaking in 20 minutes. Jake nodded, though she couldn't see him. "All right. I'll come inside and watch it with you." He hung up and turned off the TV, grabbing his keys from the workbench. As he locked up the garage, he noticed Mrs. Harper from down the street standing in her driveway, staring up at the sky. She held a pair of binoculars in one hand and looked pale, like she'd seen a ghost. Jake hesitated, then waved. "You all right, Mrs. Harper?" She lowered the binoculars and shook her head. "I don't know, Jake. Something doesn't feel right about this." He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be fine, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he gave her a weak smile and headed home. When Jake walked through the front door, Karen was already seated on the couch, gripping a cup of coffee like it might save her from whatever came next. The living room was silent except for the low murmur of the television. On screen, reporters speculated wildly about the mysterious fleet. Some claimed it was a hoax. Others warned of impending doom. Finally, the screen switched to a live feed of the White House. The president stepped up to the podium, flanked by military officials. His expression was grim. "Citizens of Earth," he began, his voice steady but heavy with gravity. "We have confirmed the presence of extraterrestrial vessels in our skies. These beings have issued a single demand: surrender or face annihilation." Karen gasped, clutching the armrest. Jake froze, his mind racing. Surrender? To aliens? What did that even mean? Before either of them could process the implications, the broadcast cut to footage of people panicking in the streets, cars abandoned, families fleeing their homes. Chaos was spreading faster than wildfire. Jake sank into the chair opposite Karen, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. But deep down, he knew it was. And worse, he realized, no one, not the government, not the army, was ready for this. Whatever happened next, humanity would have to figure it out on its own. The days following the president's announcement were a blur of fear and confusion. Jake spent most of his time glued to the TV, watching as world leaders tried, and failed, to negotiate with the mysterious invaders. The aliens, who called themselves the Vorthax, refused to engage in any meaningful dialogue. Their ships remained ominously silent, casting long shadows over cities and towns. It was as if they were waiting for something. One afternoon, Karen came home from the grocery store looking pale. "They're sending people to talk to them," she said, dropping her bag on the counter. Some kind of delegation. Scientists, diplomats, that sort of thing. Jake frowned, turning down the volume on the news. You think it'll work? Karen shook her head. I don't know. But what choice do we have? If we don't try, they might just attack. Her words hung heavy in the air. Jake wanted to believe that diplomacy would solve everything, that cooler heads would prevail, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to end well. Still, he kept his doubts to himself. There was no point worrying Karen more than she already was. The next day, the world watched anxiously as the United Nations delegation approached one of the largest alien vessels hovering above New York City. Leading the team was Dr. Laura Bennett, a linguist and xenobiologist known for her groundbreaking research on extraterrestrial life. Her calm demeanor and sharp intellect made her the obvious choice for such a dangerous mission. Cameras captured every moment. The sleek, insect-like design of the Vorthax ship, the tense expressions of the human delegates, and finally, the eerie silence as they entered the vessel. Back in Jake's living room, Karen sat perched on the edge of the couch, while Jake leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They weren't alone. Neighbors had gathered at their house to watch the broadcast together. Everyone held their breath as the screen showed the delegation walking into what appeared to be a massive chamber inside the alien ship. The walls shimmered with strange, pulsating lights, and towering insectoid creatures loomed ahead. The Vorthax stood twice the height of a human, their exoskeletons glinting menacingly under the artificial glow. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Maybe this could work. Maybe the Vorthax would listen. But then, without warning, the scene erupted into chaos. A blinding flash of light filled the screen, followed by screams and static. When the feed returned seconds later, the chamber was empty. The delegates were gone, vaporized. Karen covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face. Around the room, gasps turned to sobs. Jake clenched his fists, anger bubbling up inside him. How could they do that? These weren't soldiers. They were scientists, peacemakers. What kind of monsters didn't even give them a chance? The massacre sent shockwaves around the globe. Governments declared states of emergency, urging citizens to stay indoors or evacuate major cities. Panic spread like wildfire, with highways clogged with cars and airports overwhelmed by desperate travelers. Yet, amid the chaos, some chose to stay behind, not out of bravery, but because they had nowhere else to go. That evening, Jake attended a hastily organized community meeting at the local church. Neighbors packed the pews, their faces etched with worry. Some argued for fleeing. Others insisted on staying put. Tempers flared until a voice cut through the noise. "We can't run," said Sarah Mills, a woman Jake vaguely recognized from town. She stood near the front, her arms crossed and her expression steely. "Running won't save us. We need to fight." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Fight. Against those things. It sounded insane. Sarah continued, undeterred. "Look, I'm not saying we charge in with pitchforks. But we've got numbers, we've got ingenuity, and we've got nothing left to lose. If we band together, we might actually stand a chance." Jake studied her face, surprised by her conviction. She looked like an ordinary person. Brown hair tied back in a ponytail, jeans, and a plain t-shirt. But there was something about her tone that commanded respect. "What makes you think we can win?" Someone shouted from the back. "We don't have to win," Sarah replied evenly. "We just have to make them regret coming here." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, hesitant nods turned into murmurs of agreement. Jake found himself raising his hand when volunteers were called for. He didn't know why. He wasn't a soldier, didn't have any training, but sitting idly by felt worse. If Sarah was right, maybe they really could make a difference. As the meeting broke up, Jake introduced himself to Sarah. She gave him a firm handshake and a small smile. "Glad to have you on board," she said simply. Jake nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. This wasn't going to be easy. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. Surrender wasn't an option. Not for him, not for anyone. Whatever happened next, humanity would fight. For their homes, for their families, and for the future. The Vorthax wasted no time after the failed negotiations. Within hours, their ships descended closer to Earth, deploying ground forces in waves. Massive, insect-like machines marched through cities, obliterating anything in their path. Conventional armies tried to hold the line, but their weapons proved useless against the aliens' advanced technology. Tanks crumpled like tin foil under energy beams, and fighter jets were shot down before they could even get close. Jake watched the news footage with a growing sense of dread. The military wasn't going to stop them. No one was. And yet, scattered reports began surfacing. Ordinary people fighting back. Civilians armed with whatever they could find were taking matters into their own hands. In Chicago, a group used fireworks strapped to drones to distract a patrol of alien walkers. In Texas, farmers raid tractors with explosives to destroy supply lines. These small victories didn't turn the tide, but they gave people hope. Inspired by these stories, Jake threw himself into preparing his town's Ractic resistance group. Sarah took charge of training, teaching everyone basic combat skills and how to move quickly without being seen. "We're not soldiers," she reminded them during their first practice session. "We hit hard, we hit fast, and then we disappear. That's how we survive." Jake struggled at first. He wasn't used to handling weapons or thinking tactically, but he learned quickly, driven by the memory of Dr. Bennett and the others who had been vaporized for simply trying to talk. Every night, he practiced setting traps and assembling makeshift explosives under Sarah's watchful eye. Eric Dawson, a quiet teenager with a knack for electronics, joined the group after his family fled north. Together, they figured out how to disable alien surveillance drones using hacked radio signals. Their first real test came sooner than expected. A squad of Vorthax drones buzzed low over the outskirts of town, scanning for survivors. Jake and Sarah led a team of 6 to ambush them. Armed with Molotov cocktails and improvised flamethrowers made from aerosol cans, they hid among the trees lining an abandoned highway. As the drones passed overhead, Jake felt his heart pounding so loudly he feared it would give them away. "Wait for it," Sarah whispered, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. When the lead drone slowed to investigate a parked car, Jake nodded to Eric, who triggered a decoy signal on his laptop. The drone veered toward the noise, giving Jake just enough time to hurl his Molotov. Flames engulfed the machine, sending it crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. Cheers erupted from the group, but Sarah silenced them with a sharp gesture. "Stay focused," she hissed. One by one, they picked off the remaining drones, working together like clockwork. By the time the last one fell, Jake's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd won. Back at their makeshift base, a dilapidated barn on the edge of town, the group celebrated quietly. Karen brought sandwiches and thermoses of coffee, clapping Jake on the shoulder as she handed him a plate. "You did good today," she said softly. He managed a weak smile, though his mind kept replaying the battle. Each explosion, each burst of flame. It was exhilarating, yes, but also terrifying. This wasn't a game. People were dying out there. Friends, neighbors, strangers. They were all counting on groups like theirs to keep fighting. Word of their success spread quickly. Other survivors reached out via ham radios and encrypted messages, sharing tips and coordinating efforts. One caller introduced herself as Maria Lopez, a farmer turned sharpshooter who claimed to have taken down 3 alien patrols single-handedly. She offered to meet up and join forces, bringing much-needed supplies and expertise. As Jake listened to her voice crackle over the static-filled line, he realized something important. Humanity wasn't beaten yet. For every city destroyed, there were dozens of towns rising up. For every person who ran, there were hundreds more ready to fight. The Vorthax might have superior weapons and technology, but they didn't understand what they were up against. They didn't know that humans would never give up, not when it came to protecting their homes. And Jake, he finally understood why he volunteered. It wasn't about revenge or glory. It was about standing your ground, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. Because if you didn't, who would? As the resistance group grew stronger, Jake found himself stepping into a role he never imagined. At first, it was small things: organizing patrols, assigning tasks, making sure everyone had what they needed. But soon, people started coming to him with questions and concerns, looking for guidance. Sarah noticed this shift too, and gave him a nudge one evening after a planning session. "You're good at this," she said, leaning against the barn door as the others packed up their gear. "People trust you." Jake frowned, unsure how to respond. "I'm just trying to help." "Exactly," Sarah replied with a small smile. "That's why they listen. You don't act like you're better than anyone else. You roll up your sleeves and do the work. That's leadership, Jake." He didn't feel like a leader. He still felt like the same mechanic who'd spent his days fixing cars and avoiding trouble. But when he looked around at the faces of his group, Eric tinkering with another drone, Maria cleaning her rifle, Karen handing out supplies, he realized they were counting on him. Not because he was special, but because he cared. And maybe that was enough. Their next mission tested Jake's newfound responsibility. Intelligence from other resistance cells revealed that a Vorthax supply convoy was scheduled to pass through a nearby valley. If they could destroy it, they'd disrupt the aliens' operations in the region. The plan was risky. The convoy would be heavily guarded, but the potential payoff made it worth the danger. Jake gathered the team in the barn to go over the details. "We'll split into 2 groups," he explained, sketching a crude map on a piece of scrap paper. "Maria and I will take the high ground and provide cover fire. Sarah, you lead the second team to flank them once they're distracted." Everyone nodded, though Jake could see the tension in their eyes. This wasn't like taking out drones. This was going toe-to-toe with some of the most dangerous machines the Vorthax had deployed. Still, no one argued. They trusted him to get them through it. The night of the ambush was cold and eerily quiet. Jake crouched behind a rocky ridge with Maria, peering down at the narrow road winding through the valley. The convoy appeared as a line of glowing lights in the distance, growing brighter with each passing minute. His stomach churned, but he forced himself to focus. "Wait for my signal," he whispered into the radio. When the lead vehicle entered the kill zone, Jake gave the order. Maria fired first, her rifle cracking through the silence as rounds ricocheted off the alien armor. Explosions lit up the valley as Eric's rigged mines detonated under the tires of the trailing vehicles. Chaos erupted below, and Sarah's team moved in, striking from the shadows with precision and speed. For a moment, everything seemed to click into place. The Vorthax forces were overwhelmed, their superior technology useless against the guerrilla tactics. Jake spotted an opening and sprinted down the slope, tossing a makeshift explosive at one of the damaged walkers. It exploded in a shower of sparks, sending debris flying. But the victory came at a cost. As the last alien machine collapsed, Jake heard a shout behind him. He turned to see Eric kneeling beside Maria, blood pooling beneath her leg. She gritted her teeth, waving off their attempts to help. "I'm fine," she snapped, though her voice trembled. "Don't stop now." Jake clenched his fists, anger and guilt warring inside him. They'd won, but Maria was hurt, and it was his call that put her in harm's way. Later that night, as Karen patched up Maria's wound, Jake sat alone outside the barn, staring at the stars. He thought about all they'd lost, their homes, their peace, their innocence, and wondered if any of it was worth it. Sarah joined him after a while, sitting cross-legged beside him. "You did good tonight," she said quietly. "Did I?" Jake asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "We got lucky. Next time, we might not." She nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. "Maybe, but luck isn't the only thing keeping us alive. We're smart, We're tough, and we're fighting for something real. That counts for something. Jake. He didn't say anything, but deep down, he knew she was right. Humanity might be outnumbered and outgunned, but they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Dr. Laura Bennett had always been a woman of science, someone who believed in logic and reason above all else. But as she lay hidden in the ruins of an old factory on the outskirts of Chicago, her faith in those principles was shaken. She had survived the massacre at the alien ship, not through skill or bravery, but sheer luck. When the blinding flash consumed her colleagues, she'd stumbled backward into a maintenance corridor, shielding herself behind a thick metal door. The explosion knocked her unconscious, and when she woke hours later, the Vorthax vessel was gone, leaving only ash and silence in its wake. For days, Laura stayed off the grid, moving from one abandoned building to another, scavenging food and supplies while trying to piece together what had happened. Her scientific mind wouldn't let her give up. If humanity stood any chance against these invaders, they needed to understand them, how they fought, and most importantly, why they were here. Using fragments of data intercepted from alien transmissions, Laura began decoding their language. It wasn't easy. The Vorthax communicated in patterns of clicks and hums that bore little resemblance to human speech. But she was determined. With nothing more than a battered laptop and a portable generator, she worked tirelessly, cross-referencing sounds with images captured by surveillance drones destroyed during earlier battles. One evening, as rain pounded against the factory windows, Laura made a breakthrough. A series of repeated phrases matched footage showing massive machines drilling into the Earth's crust. Her heart raced as she realized the truth. The Vorthax weren't just invading, they were terraforming. They planned to reshape the planet to suit their needs, rendering it uninhabitable for humans. Laura knew she couldn't keep this information to herself. Using an old ham radio salvaged from a junkyard, she broadcast her findings to anyone still listening. "This is Dr. Laura Bennett," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "If you can hear me, please spread the word. The Vorthax are not here to conquer us. They are here to erase us. Their goal is to make Earth unlivable for human life. We have to stop them before it's too late." Her message reached Jake's group days later, crackling over Eric's modified receiver. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the grim news. Terraforming. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie, yet none of them doubted its validity. Laura's tone left no room for skepticism. Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So what does that mean for us?" he asked, looking around at the group. "How do we fight something like that?" "We hit their equipment," Sarah said immediately. "If they're using machines to change the environment, we destroy those machines. Cut off their tools, slow them down." Maria nodded, wincing slightly as she shifted her injured leg. "But we'll need more firepower than what we've got now. And intel. Where are these things located?" Laura's next transmission provided part of the answer. She described key installations based on satellite imagery, identifying weak points in the Vorthax defenses. One location stood out, a heavily guarded facility near Street Lewis, where energy signatures suggested advanced terraforming equipment was being tested. If they could take it out, it might buy humanity precious time. The plan was risky, suicidal, even. But Jake didn't hesitate. "We'll do it," he said firmly. "If this thing is as important as she says, we can't let it stay operational." Eric raised a hand hesitantly. "What about backup? We can't do this alone." Jake glanced at Sarah, who gave him a nod. "We reach out to other groups," she said. "Share the intel, coordinate an attack. We're stronger together." Over the next few days, Jake and Sarah worked tirelessly to rally support. Through encrypted channels, they contacted resistance cells across the Midwest, sharing Laura's findings and outlining the mission. Some groups were hesitant, others eager to join the fight. By the time they set out for Street Lewis, their numbers had doubled. As the convoy of trucks and makeshift vehicles rolled down darkened highways, Jake felt a mix of fear and resolve. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting everything humanity held dear. The Vorthax might see them as pests, but they were about to learn a hard lesson. No one defends their home like humans do. The journey to Street Lewis was tense, every mile bringing them closer to danger. Jake sat in the passenger seat of the lead truck, gripping the dashboard as Sarah drove through the shadowy countryside. The convoy moved under the cover of darkness, headlights dimmed to avoid detection. They had mapped out a route that avoided major roads, sticking to back roads and dirt paths where possible. Still, the threat of Vorthax patrols loomed over them like a storm cloud. Eric rode in the back of the truck with Maria, who insisted on coming despite her injury. She refused to stay behind, arguing that her sharpshooting skills would be crucial if things went south. "I'll crawl there if I have to," she said stubbornly when Jake tried to talk her out of it. He knew better than to argue further. Maria wasn't the kind of person you could change once she'd made up her mind. As dawn broke, they reached the outskirts of Street Lewis. The city was eerily quiet, its streets deserted except for the occasional drone scanning the skies. Their target, a sprawling alien installation surrounded by high walls and glowing energy barriers, stood near the riverbank. It looked impenetrable, but Laura's intel gave them hope. She had identified a weak point in the southeast corner where the barrier flickered intermittently, a flaw they could exploit if timed perfectly. Jake gathered the group in a crumbling parking lot a mile away to go over the plan one last time. "We split into 3 teams," he explained, pointing to a crude map drawn on a piece of cardboard. Team 1 creates a diversion at the front gate to draw their attention. Team 2 disables the barrier using these EMP devices Eric built. He held up a small device resembling a flashlight. And Team 3, me, Sarah, and Maria, gets inside to plant explosives on the terraforming equipment. Everyone nodded, though the weight of the mission hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just another raid, it was everything. If they failed, the Vorthax would gain momentum, and Earth's fate would be sealed. At dusk, the operation began. Team 1, led by Daniel Carter, a former Marine who had joined forces with Jake weeks earlier, roared toward the main entrance in a stolen pickup truck rigged with fireworks and smoke bombs. The noise and chaos drew immediate attention, sending squads of Vorthax drones swarming to investigate. Meanwhile, Team 2 slipped through the shadows, heading for the barrier's weak spot. Jake watched anxiously from his position near the perimeter as Eric worked his magic. Sparks flew as he connected wires, sweat dripping down his face. Finally, with a triumphant grin, he activated the EMP device. The barrier flickered, then vanished entirely. "Go," Eric shouted, waving them forward. Jake, Sarah, and Maria sprinted through the opening, hearts pounding. Inside, the facility was a maze of towering machines and pulsating conduits. They followed Laura's schematics carefully, dodging patrols and avoiding detection. When they finally reached the core chamber housing the terraforming equipment, Jake felt a surge of relief and dread. The machinery hummed ominously, radiating heat so intense it made breathing difficult. "Set the charges," Jake ordered, pulling out the explosives. His hand shook as he attached the devices to key points along the structure. Every second felt like an eternity. Just as they finished, alarms blared overhead. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an eerie glow. "They know we're here," Sarah yelled, raising her rifle. Gunfire erupted outside as Vorthax reinforcements poured into the compound. "We don't have time to fight our way out," Jake shouted. "Run." They bolted toward the exit, explosions rocking the ground behind them as the charges detonated. Heat singed Jake's back as he dove through the collapsing doorway, landing hard on the asphalt outside. Smoke billowed into the sky, lighting up the horizon like a second sunrise. But the victory came at a cost. As they regrouped near the trucks, Eric was missing. Jake's stomach sank. "Where is he?" he demanded, scanning the faces around him. "He stayed behind to cover us," Maria said quietly, her voice cracking. He knew we wouldn't make it out otherwise. Jake clenched his fists, guilt and grief washing over him. Eric had sacrificed himself so they could escape. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Eric's voice crackled over the radio. "Mission accomplished. Guys, get out of there." Tears streamed down Jake's face as they sped away, leaving the burning wreckage behind. Eric was gone, but his bravery had saved them all. And as they drove into the night, Jake vowed to honor his memory, to keep fighting, no matter what. The destruction of the terraforming facility sent shockwaves through both humanity and the Vorthax. News of the attack spread quickly, thanks to encrypted radio broadcasts shared among resistance groups. For the first time in weeks, hope began to flicker in the hearts of those still fighting. Jake's group became a symbol of defiance, proof that even ordinary people could strike meaningful blows against an overwhelming enemy. But the victory was bittersweet. Eric's sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone, especially Jake. Back at their makeshift base, a cluster of tents and vehicles hidden deep in the woods. Morale was low. Maria spent hours sharpening her knife in silence, while Sarah pored over maps, planning their next move. Karen tried to keep spirits up by cooking hot meals, but the laughter and camaraderie that once filled the camp were gone. Jake felt the loss most acutely. Every decision he made now carried the weight of knowing someone might not come back. One evening, as rain drummed against the tarp overhead, the radio crackled to life. A voice came through, calm but firm. "This is Daniel Carter. We've been watching your work. You're doing good things out there." Jake exchanged a glance with Sarah before responding. "Who's this again?" "Daniel Carter," the voice repeated. "Former Marine. My team operates in southern Illinois. We've been hitting supply lines and taking out patrols. Thought it was time we joined forces." Jake hesitated. Trust didn't come easily these days, and bringing strangers into the fold was risky. But they needed allies if they wanted to keep pushing back against the Vorthax. "All right," he said finally. "Where do we meet?" They arranged to rendezvous at an abandoned gas station along Highway 51. The next morning, Jake, Sarah, and Maria arrived to find a convoy of battered trucks and jeeps waiting for them. Standing at the center was Daniel, a tall man with close-cropped hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. He shook Jake's hand firmly, his grip steady. "Heard about what you did in Street Lewis," he said. "Impressive." "Thanks," Jake replied, unsure how to take the compliment. "What about you? What's your story?" Daniel gestured to his team, a mix of men and women dressed in mismatched gear. "We've been hitting the Vorthax hard wherever we can. Small targets mostly, supply depots, communication arrays, but we're ready for something bigger." Over the next hour, they shared intel and strategies. Daniel's group brought valuable resources, weapons scavenged from military bases, medical supplies, and detailed maps of Vorthax strongholds. In return, Jake's team provided first-hand knowledge of alien tactics and weaknesses. Together, they began planning their next mission: a coordinated assault on a heavily fortified alien outpost near Carbondale. As the two groups merged, tension surfaced. Some of Daniel's people questioned Jake's leadership, skeptical of his lack of formal training. Jake caught snippets of whispered conversations, comments about how he was just a mechanic, or lucky so far. It stung, but he bit his tongue. He knew proving himself would take more than words. Sarah noticed his frustration and pulled him aside later that night. "Don't let them get to you," she said, handing him a cup of coffee. "They'll see what you're made of soon enough." Jake sighed, staring into the fire burning in the center of the camp. "I just wish I had all the answers, like I actually deserve to be in charge." "No one has all the answers," Sarah said gently. "But you care about these people. That's why they follow you. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with him as they prepared for the attack. Over the next few days, the combined group trained together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Maria taught Daniel's snipers how to pick off drones without being detected, while Eric's old tricks with hack devices proved invaluable for disabling alien tech. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. As they loaded into vehicles under the pale light of dawn, Jake addressed the group. "This isn't going to be easy," he admitted, his voice carrying across the quiet camp. "But we've done the impossible before, and we'll do it again." The convoy rolled out, determination etched on every face. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for revenge, for justice, for everything the Vorthax had taken from them. No matter what happened next, one thing was certain: humanity wasn't backing down. Not today. Not ever. The raid on the Carbondale outpost began under the cover of darkness, with rain falling steadily and turning the ground to mud. Jake's group moved in silence, their boots squelching softly as they approached the alien stronghold. The outpost was a fortress of jagged metal walls and glowing energy barriers, surrounded by patrols of insect-like drones. It looked impenetrable, but Laura's intel had provided them with a critical advantage: a blind spot in the surveillance grid where they could slip through unnoticed. Jake led the first team, crawling on their stomachs through the wet grass toward the perimeter. His heart pounded in his chest, each breath shallow to avoid making noise. Beside him, Maria clutched her rifle tightly, her eyes scanning the horizon for movement. Sarah stayed close behind, whispering encouragement over the radio to the other squads positioned around the base. "Team 2, status," Jake whispered into his earpiece. "We're in position," Daniel's voice crackled back, "waiting for your signal." "Roger that," Jake replied. He glanced at Maria, who nodded sharply. They were ready. When they reached the blind spot, Eric's hack drones came online, buzzing loudly near the front gate. The decoy worked perfectly. The Vorthax guards scrambled to investigate, leaving the rear entrance vulnerable. Jake signaled for his team to move, and they darted forward, slipping past the distracted patrols. Adrenaline surged through him as they reached the outer wall, its surface slick with rain. Inside, the compound was a maze of towering machinery and pulsating conduits. The air smelled metallic, and the hum of alien technology vibrated in Jake's bones. They followed Laura's schematics carefully, sticking to the shadows and avoiding detection. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and they'd be dead. "Barrier control room is ahead," Sarah murmured, pointing to a narrow corridor lit by eerie blue light. "Daniel's team will meet us there." They reached the room without incident, finding Daniel and his people already inside. Together, they disabled the inner barrier using EMP devices, clearing the way for the final push. Jake divided the group again. Half would secure the area while he, Sarah, and Maria went after the main objective: a central hub controlling the outpost's defenses. The hub was located deep within the facility, guarded by a squad of heavily armed Vorthax drones. Jake's pulse raced as they edged closer, weapons drawn. "Stay low," he whispered, motioning for Maria to take the high ground. She climbed onto a stack of crates, her rifle aimed steadily at the patrol ahead. When the drones passed beneath her perch, Maria fired, taking out 2 with precise shots. The rest turned toward the sound, giving Jake and Sarah an opening. They charged forward, firing wildly as explosions rocked the corridor. The chaos was deafening. Shouts, gunfire, and the screech of alien machinery filled the air. Finally, they'd reached the hub, a massive console glowing with strange symbols. Jake planted explosives hurriedly, his hands trembling as he attached the charges. "That's it," he yelled. "Let's go." But as they turned to retreat, a Vorthax drone blocked their path, its weapon trained directly at them. Jake froze, his mind racing. There was no way out. Then, from behind, Daniel appeared, launching a grenade that sent the creature crashing to the ground. "Move," he shouted. They ran for their lives, dodging falling debris as the explosives detonated behind them. The entire facility shook violently, sending sparks flying and walls collapsing. Jake tripped and fell, landing hard on the unforgiving floor. Strong hands grabbed him by the arm, pulling him to his feet. It was Sarah. "Keep moving," she urged. They burst outside just as the building erupted in a fiery explosion, lighting up the night sky. Rain mixed with ash as they collapsed onto the muddy ground, gasping for air. Around them, cheers broke out as survivors regrouped, battered but alive. Jake looked back at the burning wreckage, his chest heaving. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck another blow against the invaders. But as he scanned the faces of his team, relief mingled with sorrow. Too many had been lost, too much sacrificed. Still, one truth remained undeniable. Humanity wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The success of the Carbondale raid spread like wildfire, inspiring resistance groups across the country to step up their efforts. For weeks, humanity had been on the defensive, running, hiding, and barely surviving. But now, something shifted. The Vorthax might have superior technology and numbers, but they hadn't counted on one thing: the sheer determination of ordinary people fighting for their homes. Jake's group became a rallying point, their victories proving that even the smallest acts of defiance could make a difference. Resistance cells from neighboring states began reaching out, sharing strategies, and coordinating attacks. Laura's intercepted transmissions revealed key alien installations, giving them targets to hit. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. In towns and cities, civilians joined the fight in ways big and small. Farmers repurposed tractors into armored vehicles, loading them with explosives to ram alien patrols. Teenagers used social media platforms to spread misinformation, tricking the Vorthax into wasting resources chasing fake threats. Even children played their part, scrawling graffiti on walls to mark safe zones or signal danger. It was guerrilla warfare at its most chaotic and effective. One evening, as Jake sat around a campfire with his team, Daniel approached holding a map covered in red circles. "These are priority targets," he explained, pointing to locations marked across the Midwest. "Supply depots, communication hubs, terraforming equipment. Hit these, and we cripple their operations." Jake studied the map, his mind racing. "We can't do it alone," he said finally. "But if we coordinate with other groups—" "Exactly," Daniel interrupted, nodding. "Spread the word. Tell everyone to strike within 48 hours. If we hit them all at once, they won't know where to turn." The plan was risky, perhaps the riskiest they'd attempted yet, but there was no time to hesitate. Over the next 2 days, encrypted messages flew back and forth between resistance cells, confirming participation and synchronizing timing. Jake felt a mix of pride and anxiety as he listened to the responses. People were scared, but they weren't backing down. Not this time. When the coordinated assault began, chaos erupted across the region. In Chicago, a group of survivors used hack drones to disable an alien surveillance network, leaving the city temporarily blind to incoming attacks. In Kansas City, farmers armed with improvised flamethrowers ambushed a convoy of supply ships, destroying crates of alien tech before they could be deployed. And in St. Louis, remnants of Jake's original team sabotaged another terraforming facility, ensuring Earth remained habitable for just a little longer. The Vorthax responded with brutal force, deploying reinforcements to quell the uprising. But for every patrol they sent, another resistance cell struck elsewhere. The invaders were stretched thin, their once flawless coordination faltering under the weight of relentless assaults. Humanity's unpredictability became their greatest weapon. Back at the base, Jake monitored the reports flooding in over the radio. Each victory brought a surge of hope, but also reminders of the cost. Casualty numbers climbed daily, and supplies dwindled faster than they could be replenished. Still, no one suggested giving up. They couldn't, not when they were so close to turning the tide. On the third day of the offensive, news arrived that changed everything. A massive alien ship hovering above New York City suddenly descended, unleashing waves of reinforcements onto the streets below. The resistance fighters there fought valiantly, but it was clear they were outnumbered. Then, unexpectedly, residents who had fled earlier returned, flooding the streets with makeshift weapons and raw courage. Together, They pushed the Vorthax back, forcing the ship to retreat. The broadcast of the battle went viral, shared via hacked satellite feeds worldwide. Seeing ordinary citizens standing shoulder to shoulder against towering alien machines ignited something in humanity, a collective realization that surrender was not an option. From Europe to Asia, similar scenes unfolded as people rose up en masse, refusing to let their worlds be taken without a fight. Jake watched the footage late into the night, tears streaming down his face. He thought about Eric, Maria, and all the others who had given everything for this cause. Their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. And for the first time since the invasion began, Jake allowed himself to believe they might actually win. But deep down, he knew the war was far from over. The Vorthax wouldn't give up easily. Still, one truth burned brighter than ever. No one defended their home like humans did. And as long as there were people willing to stand and fight, the invaders would never truly conquer Earth. Months of relentless fighting finally began to wear down the Vorthax. Their once imposing fleet shrank. As ships retreated into orbit, their ground forces stretched too thin to maintain control over Earth's vast landscapes. Jake stood atop a hill overlooking what remained of his hometown, now reduced to rubble and ash. The scars of war were everywhere: burned-out buildings, abandoned cars, streets littered with debris. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a quiet resilience in the air. The final push came when Laura intercepted a transmission revealing the location of the Vorthax command ship. It orbited high above Earth, coordinating every attack, every patrol, every move the invaders made. Take it out, and the rest of the fleet would fall into disarray. The Resistance knew this was their last chance to end the war for good. Jake gathered his team one last time, their faces weary but determined. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "If we can take out that ship, we win. No more running, no more hiding. But make no mistake, it's going to be dangerous." No one argued. They had come too far to back down now. Supplies were low, and many of their friends were gone, but the fire in their hearts burned brighter than ever. Together, they boarded a stolen alien transport ship, modified by Eric's designs before his death. Its cloaking technology gave them a slim chance of reaching the command vessel undetected. As they ascended through Earth's atmosphere, Jake looked out the window at the planet below. Fires still burned in some places, smoke staining the horizon. But he also saw signs of life. People rebuilding, planting crops, raising flags on makeshift poles. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was healing, growing stronger with each passing day. Reaching the command ship was a nerve-wracking ordeal. Alarms blared as their cloaking device failed near the docking bay, forcing them to fight their way inside. The interior was a labyrinth of alien architecture, all sharp angles and glowing panels. Every corner held danger: patrolling drones, automated defenses, and towering Vorthax warriors. Jake led the charge, his rifle blazing as he pushed deeper into the ship. Sarah covered him from behind, her aim as steady as ever, while Daniel and Maria flanked them, clearing rooms with brutal efficiency. Each step felt like walking through a nightmare, but they pressed on, driven by the memory of everyone who had fallen along the way. Finally, they reached the control chamber, a massive room filled with pulsating machinery and holographic displays. At its center stood the Vorthax commander, an enormous insectoid creature surrounded by a swarm of guards. Jake didn't hesitate. He fired his weapon, creating chaos as his team moved in to disable the systems. The battle was fierce, every second feeling like an eternity. Jake planted explosives on key consoles, setting timers as energy beams zipped past his head. When the charges detonated, the entire ship shook violently, alarms screaming in a deafening crescendo. "Let's go," Jake shouted, leading the retreat. They barely made it out alive, leaping onto their transport ship moments before the command vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. As they descended back toward Earth, Jake watched the remaining alien ships flee into the void, abandoning their conquest. When they landed, cheers erupted from the crowd waiting below. Strangers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Jake stepped off the ship, greeted by Karen, who threw her arms around him tightly. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel relief. Later that night, Jake climbed the same hill where he'd stood earlier, staring at the stars. The cost of victory weighed heavily on him. Eric, Maria, countless others. But so did the hope of a brighter future. Beside him, Sarah joined silently, handing him a cup of coffee. "We did it," she said softly. "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's not over. We got a lot of work ahead of us." She nodded, looking out at the ruined town below. "We'll rebuild. Together." And they would. Humanity had proven something vital, not just to themselves, but to any potential threat lurking among the stars. Earth wasn't easy prey. No one defended their home like humans did. And that truth would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.